الله بالخير. لعل صعود الصين في العقدين الماضيين أدى إلى تغيير وجه الاقتصاد العالمي، كذلك الدبلوماسية الدولية، وشكل طلائع نظام عالمي جديد. في كتابه العصر الجديد الذي تمثله الصين اليوم، يشرح الخبير في الدراسات الصينية كو كين كي واقع صعود الصين في عهد الرئيس شي جين بينغ، كيف غير صعود الصين الصاروخي ديناميات القوى العالمية في القرن ال21. هل يشهد العالم مع اكتمال مبادرة الحزام والطريق فجر القرن الآسيوي؟ هل يعتبر الغرب صعود الصين تهديداً للنظام الدولي الليبرالي؟ من المنافسة الجيوسياسية إلى التعاون الجيوسياسي، هل تعيد الصين تعريف الديمقراطية في عالمنا اليوم؟ وما هي رؤية الصين للنظام العالمي الجديد؟ نرحب بكم ونرى ونسمع أكثر من الأستاذ كو كين كي، رئيس مركز آسيا الجديدة والشاملة CNIA في البعد الأقرب. هذه الميادين وأنا زينب صفار، خليكم ويانا. Ko King Kee, President of the Center for New Inclusive Asia CNIA, founder and president of East-West Bridge Platform, advisor to the ASEAN Research Institute, and author of The New Era in Today's China. Mr. Ko King Kee, salam and welcome to Al Mayadeen. This is the Proximate Aspect. I'm Zainab Al Safa. A pleasure to have you, sir, joining us all the way from Kuala Lumpur.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Our pleasure, sir. Well, the global challenges we face today, sir, impose the need for a new paradigm of global governance. It must take into account the dynamics brought by the collective rise of the global south, globalization, and technology advancements, as experts argue. In this sense, sir, might you explain how did China's rise change the dynamics of global power in the 21st century?
Yes, I think the rise of China is the most important phenomena in the 21st century. It changed the global dynamics, changed its face, the well-being of its people, and changed the track of world history. China became the second largest economy within a short period of 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
You know, from big backwater, and it is now the manufacturing powerhouse, which is very pivotal to the global supply chains, and is the top trading country in the world, with more than 120 countries at its main trading partners.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Of course, China's rise took a different development path, which is very different from the conventional economic textbook. You know, is centralized regime, and it practiced a mixed economy, market economy, as well as a very important role played by the states. China's rise is realized within the current global system. It has learned, it has embraced the global system, it has embraced the world, learned from the world, and realized its growth from the world and within the current system.
Soon after taking office, U.S. President Joe Biden warned his compatriots that the distribution of power across the world is changing, creating new threats. China in particular. How does China, as the U.S. claims purportedly, not only challenge regional stability, but also threaten the U.S.-led rules-based order, Mr. Ko?
China benefited from joining the world system. It has no intention to supplant it with its own political model or its or export its ideology or whatever it is. U.S. alleged that China is more assertive. Well, China now accounts for 18% of global GDP. Of course, with such a GDP, you want to have a bigger voice in the world.
Sure.
Now, the current global order architectured by the West, no doubt there is some prejudices against China, and which China seek to redress with its own view. But by and large, China is happy to continue with the current system, which is not true that China want to change the world order. Of course, there is some what we said. The West assert that China is more assertive.
Right.
China is no longer a small country. It decides it wants its voice to be heard, and China's rise has led to the so-called rise of the rest. China contributed 30% to global growth over the past 30 years.
Yes, of course, we all know that China's spectacular and enormous rise, together with the global South countries, has irreversibly shifted the global power dynamics. The world is no longer unipolar, but multipolar. Has, Dr. Ko, Mr. Ko, the U.S. become the cause of global governance deficit due to its refusal to share power? And how is China redefining democracy today?
Yes, I think you are right. Now, it is important to reflect what happened since the collapse of Soviet Russia. In 1992, 1 year immediately after the collapse of Soviet Russia or the end of the Cold War, Pentagon come up with a so-called defense policy guidance, which categorically declared that U.S. global strategy from then on is to prevent the emergence or re-emergence of any power that pose a challenge to its global supremacy. From then on, U.S. continue to pursue this global strategic objective. China's rise ineptly, shifted the global power dynamics. So, and U.S. deemed China's rise under CPC, which they deem as a centralized autocratic government, as a threat to its global supremacy and also a threat to the liberal international order.
Now, yes, go ahead, sir, please.
So it is resorting to all kinds of tricks to prevent, to contain the rise of China, particularly the Indo-Pacific strategy is specifically tailored to contain and curtail the rise of China.
Right. We will come to talk about this particular point. In the eyes of Western so-called democracy advocates, China is a centralized authoritarian regime. Its rise is seen as a threat to the liberal international order. Is containing China's rise now becoming the bipartisan consensus in Washington?
Containing China has become the bipartisan consensus in Washington. The Democrats and Republicans can different in many things, but when it comes to China, that is the easiest way to get the consensus and get law passed in the Senate or Congress. That is true.
Now, as we said, Dr. Ko, and experts underscore, the world continues to move toward multipolarity. Former U.S. Secretary of State Henry Kissinger stated recently that, and I'm quoting him, that China has in recent years declared that it needs to be a participant in the creation of the world order. Might you try to sketch more the contours of this Chinese world order, and how is China turning geopolitical competition into geopolitical cooperation with the concept of a community with a shared future?
Yes, I think this is very important. Yeah. President Xi Jinping has propagated this concept of a community with shared future as this concept of global governance, which is inclusive, and it emphasizes that there is no civilization in the world that is more superior than others. All countries should respect each other, learn from each other, and we should love planet Earth, which is which we all call home. You see, because it is important. We are all members of. We live this global village. We are a community of shared future. So, which is very different from the Western-dominated global order, which their view is either my way or highway. You have to conform, to my value, to my system, and benefit my country. And that is how the West dominate and the world, in their view.
Well, to bring you to our part of the world, we know that China remains the largest trade partner of Arab countries, with trade volume reaching $430 billion in the year 2022. China's move into Middle East great power politics, in particular, shows a new capacity and willingness to act. Wu Xinbu, Dean of the Institute of International Studies at Fudan University in Shanghai, said, quote, "In the past, we would declare some principles, make our position known, but not get involved operationally. That is going to change. Why now, Mr. Ko?"
Yes, I think the Ukraine war, has changed the global geopolitical landscape. China has brokered the very rapprochement between Iran and Saudi, and they have these two countries have reconnected and resumed their diplomatic relations. So as China become more, what they said in the words of the Chinese government, walking closer to the central stage of the world, you would like to play a more constructive role, as a broker. As a peacemaker, and implement its view that peace and development goes hand in hand, and the world needs peace for development. And I think this is a very major shift in the geopolitical landscape of the world from now on. That in the past, Middle East and Central Asia used to be, dominated by US. US used to be the main player in that part of the world, but now it has changed. Not too long ago, China convened this China and Central Asia Summit, and of course last year, President Xi Jinping visited Saudi and was given a very warm, unprecedented welcome. So these are all signs it's changing, and the Arab countries, the Muslim countries are moving towards China.
Sure. Well, ASEAN, or the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, directly relates to both the Silk Route economic belt and the Maritime Silk Road. This strategic corridor is expected to improve, well, China's cooperation with the ASEAN countries in terms of infrastructure development, trade transaction, investment, and tourism. How can we describe, Mr. Ko, the relationship between China and ASEAN member countries, as well as expected areas of opportunity stemming from the Belt and Road Initiative?
Yes, China and ASEAN countries have very long, cordial relationship, dating 1,000 years back. And maybe it was interrupted during the Cold War, but it has resumed since the Cold War ended and the relationship flourished. China is now ASEAN's biggest trade partner, and the total trade between the two countries, I think, is expected to exceed 1 trillion in USD. China is the close neighbor of US, So this does make afford ASEAN some advantage over the how it benefit from the rise of China. So China ASEAN trade, increased by 85% since China become a dialogue partner of ASEAN in 1991. 85% from 1991 to I think 2020. So you see how ASEAN has benefited. I think this relationship, despite some dispute over the South China Sea, is going to continue. The next 10 years will be golden years for China-ASEAN relation. Because last year, 2021, China-ASEAN has elevated its relationship to a comprehensive strategic partnership. So I think it's going to be better,
right,
especially with the implementation of RCEP. Everyone will.
Right. So as the author of The New Era in today's China and ASEAN are two of the most robust economies of the world. There is no doubt that China, India, and ASEAN are the primary drivers of Asia's growth. Are we witnessing the dawn of the Asian century?
Yes, of course. Many people said we have witnessed the dawn of the Asian century, but it's interesting to note that President Xi Jinping also said this is dawn of the Asia-Pacific century. That means it's more inclusive. So China's rise provide the impetus to the rest of the ASEAN countries, particularly these ASEAN and also South Asia, for example, Pakistan, even India benefited, and Bangladesh. So yes, and then Korea and Japan, despite the fact that the U.S. allies, they benefited tremendously from China's rise. For example, Korea's trade with China is equal to what I think is equal to U.S. and Japan combined. It's much bigger, and China trade is double the volume of ASEAN U.S. trade.
Right. Well, in this sense, on the other hand, one just has to take a look at the U.S. strategic framework for Indo-Pacific, which is the policy guide for the U.S. to counter China in the Indo-Pacific, to understand the strategic importance of ASEAN to the U.S. and that a loss in U.S. preeminence in Indo-Pacific will weaken its ability to achieve U.S. interest globally. How is the Biden administration implementing the action plans of the strategic framework to counter China's growing influence in the region?
Yeah, firstly, I think we have to understand that Indo-Pacific is a geopolitical term. It is not a geographical term. So Indo-Pacific was created to pull India in, and then promote the role of Quad, quote unquote, in India. China of course, I don't think China is going to be very much affected by this Indo-Pacific strategy over its relationship with ASEAN. This ASEAN actually has become the battleground of the great power competition between US and China. It is very important, because it's the most robust economy in the world right now, and it geographically very strategically located. The South China Sea is of strategic importance to the national security and sovereignty of China. So all in all, it becomes so important for US to control China. Yeah, but I think according to the latest report, US influence in ASEAN is reducing, whereas China's influence in ASEAN countries is on the rise.
Right. Well, U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken, he spoke by phone with the Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang. He stressed on the importance of maintaining open lines of communication to responsibly manage the relationship between the two powers, China and the U.S. Could that be possible, sir, in the wake of the American threats and belligerency?
U.S. wants to maintain its global supremacy. As long as U.S. do not accept China as peers, the relationship between China will be just as it is. However, both countries also realize that there will be no winner, if there's a war between the two countries. So both countries also try to so-called build a gut rail, to prevent the strategic competition become a conflict. So I think it is important for both countries to maintain the channel of communication open. I think there's very little political trust between the two countries. So just a balloon, destroy all the goodwill achieved during the Bali, meeting between Xi and Biden. So it is difficult to resume the political trust. U.S. the most important competition between China and U.S. in the 21st century is actually in the high-tech domain. That is an indication. As long as U.S. continue to suppress and contain China in the high-tech domain, there's no way, no chance. And likewise, if there's any sincerity at all for U.S. to improve the relationship with China, it should lift the tariff imposed on Chinese imports, because actually the U.S. consumers are suffering from such a tariff, not China.
Sure,
the trade between
that's
China
very
and
true.
Greece.
Right. I would like to seize the moment and ask you about an interesting issue. Now, the world is well informed about Sun Tzu's The Art of War, but knows little of Sima Fa. What is Sima Fa?
Yeah, this is now there are two military treatises in
doctrines, so to say.
Yeah, basically this Sima Fa says that even though the country is powerful, bureaucracy, will ruin itself. And when the world is peaceful, if you forget about getting yourself prepared for war, you are in danger. So that is basically China's military strategy is defensive.
I'm afraid we have to leave it there. Mr. Ko King-Kee, President of the Center for New Inclusive Asia. Thank you very much, sir, for your illuminating perspectives. Always a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Always welcome, sir. في 24 من شباط فبراير الذكرى الأولى للعملية الروسية في أوكرانيا، أصدرت الصين ورقة موقف بعنوان موقف الصين من التسوية السياسية للأزمة الأوكرانية. دعا فيها الرئيس الصيني شي جين بينغ إلى اتفاق سلمي ومنطقي لحل الأزمة، مشدداً على الحوار والتفاوض كحل وحيد قابل للتطبيق لفض النزاع. لعل هذه الورقة تظهر موقف الصين المسؤول المتمثل في عدم المراقبة بصمت وعدم صب الزيت على النار. لقد حان الوقت للولايات المتحدة وحلفائها في الغرب للتخلي عن خطابهم العدائي واعتناق هذا النوع من الدبلوماسية المتعددة الأطراف التي تتبناها الصين. ولكن ما هو رد إدارة الولايات المتحدة الأمريكية؟ التهديد بمزيد من العقوبات ضد الدول غير الراغبة في الانصياع لمطالبها. ألا يوضح هذا الواقع حقيقة أن الصين وروسيا تكشفان الولايات المتحدة محرضاً رئيسياً على الحروب والفوضى الدولية؟ من كل الميادين سلاماً وتحية، في أمان الله.